The satellite phone buzzed on the metal nightstand, its faint glow cutting through the darkness of the cramped quarters. Jack Callahan, 53, rubbed his grease-streaked hands on a rag, his muscles aching from a 14-hour shift on the offshore oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. 28 years on rigs from the North Sea to the Arabian Gulf had carved lines into his face and a quiet resilience into his soul. The clock read 3:17, IEMing local time off the Louisiana coast. He squinted at the screen, expecting a routine update from the rig supervisor. Instead, it was a text from his wife of 19 years, Laura. "I'm done, Jack. I'm leaving you and moving to Santa Fe with my 26-year-old partner. I've taken our money. Good luck." A kiss emoji punctuated the message, like a mocking cherry on a sundae of betrayal. A second text followed, a screenshot of their joint savings account now showing a balance of $0. 3 cents where $178,000, 0 cents had been 3 days ago. Jack's calloused fingers hovered over the phone. His heart thudded, but his face stayed stone cold, a habit honed from years of keeping calm in high-stakes drilling operations. Laura, the woman he'd met at a dive bar in Houston, the one who'd laughed at his bad jokes and promised to wait through his long rotations, had just gutted their life together, and she'd done it with a smiley face. He didn't smash the phone, didn't curse or wake the 2 riggers snoring in the bunks above. Instead, he typed, "Fine, take care." Then he powered off the device, grabbed his towel, and headed for the showers. The scalding water couldn't wash away the sting, but it gave him a moment to think. Laura's message wasn't just a breakup. It was a declaration of war. The next morning, Jack skipped the mess hall's usual bacon and eggs, heading straight to the control deck. The Gulf's humid air clung to his skin as he ran safety checks on the drilling equipment. His second-in-command, Tommy Ruiz, a wiry Texan with a knack for reading people, noticed the tightness in Jack's jaw. "You good, boss?" Tommy asked, tightening a valve. "Solid," Jack replied, his voice flat. Personal problems didn't belong on a rig where one mistake could cost 18 men their lives. He buried himself in the rhythm of the job, gauges, pressure readings, the roar of the drill. But Laura's words looped in his mind, each replay sharpening the edges of her betrayal. At lunch, alone in the rig's small office, Jack checked his email on a secure laptop. Laura had already escalated. A legal notice from a divorce attorney named Preston Caldwell landed in his inbox, claiming Jack had abandoned the marriage by working overseas too much. She was seeking spousal support, citing his excessive income from years of 6-figure contracts. Another email forwarded by their bank confirmed she'd drained not just the $178,000, 0 cents, but had been siphoning funds for over a year. $237, 0 cents in total, moved to an account under her maiden name. She'd even taken out a $50, 0 cents home equity loan on their Galveston beach house, forging Jack's signature. Jack's grip tightened on the laptop, but he didn't flinch. He'd seen storms before, hurricanes that rocked rigs, markets that crashed, his early investments. This was just another kind. He opened a new email and typed a single line to his cousin Ethan, a sharp-eyed CPA in Austin. Time for Blue Horizon. No explanation needed. Blue Horizon was their code, a plan they'd set up a decade ago after Jack watched a buddy lose everything in a messy divorce. 3 minutes later, Ethan's reply came. "On it. Don't respond to her until you're back on land." Jack had 3 weeks left on this rotation. 3 weeks of 12-hour shifts in 95-degree heat, with the Gulf's waves crashing below and the life he'd built dissolving 1,200 miles away. He could have requested emergency leave, but what for? To chase a woman who'd already checked out? No. He'd finish the job, draw his paycheck, and face the wreckage on his terms. That night, as the rig's generators hummed, Jack lay on his bunk, staring at the steel ceiling. Memories of Laura flickered like an old film reel. They'd met 20 years ago at a bar near the Houston Ship Channel. She was 30, pouring drinks with a quick wit that could charm anyone. He was 33, home between contracts, his savings growing from a lucky shale gas investment. Their wedding, a small affair on Galveston's beach, had felt like a promise of forever. His rotations, 2 months on, 1 off, were tough, but the money was life-changing. In 6 months, he earned what most in their town made in 4 years. Laura had agreed it was worth it. She'd manage the home front. He'd secure their future. But cracks had appeared. 5 years ago, she'd started complaining about missed anniversaries, about how her friends' husbands were home for barbecues. 3 years ago, she'd stopped sending photos of her daily life, her garden, her book club. Last summer, during his last visit home, she'd redecorated their house without a word. New curtains, new couches, a vibe he didn't recognize. I needed a fresh start, she'd said. He hadn't pressed her on what fresh meant. 2 months ago, he'd noticed transfers from their joint account to one he didn't know. Roof repairs, she'd claimed. But when he drove by the house before this rotation, the roof looked fine. A silver Porsche he'd never seen sat in the driveway. A month ago, her calls stopped, just texts, always busy with a new art project. He'd almost flown home early, but trust, or maybe denial, kept him on the rig. Now, the truth was undeniable. Ethan's next email sent via their encrypted account laid it bare. Laura's partner was Cody Vance, a 26-year-old former gym trainer with a rap sheet of failed ventures and a history of cozying up to older, wealthier women. 3 relationships in 5 years, all with women over 40, all ending when the money ran dry. Ethan had dug deeper. Laura had changed the beneficiary on Jack's $500,000 0-cents life insurance policy 6 months ago, naming herself. Worse, texts between her and Cody, pulled from her phone's cloud backup, she'd used Jack's Apple ID and never changed the password, hinted at a plan B. One message from Cody read, "If he doesn't sign off on the bank, we go to the backup. Accidents happen on rigs all the time." Jack's blood ran cold. The rig's hum faded as the words sank in. This wasn't just greed. It was a calculated dismantling of his life, with a side of something darker. Laura hadn't just left him. She was trying to erase him. He closed the laptop and stood, the small room feeling smaller. The betrayal stung. But it was the planning that hit harder. 14 months of lies, of smiling through video calls while funneling his money to a con man. Jack's jaw clenched. He wasn't the type to break down. He'd survived blowouts, layoffs, and a near miss with a collapsing derrick. This was just another kind of blowout, and he'd contain it. He walked to the rig's deck, the Gulf's black waves stretching to the horizon. The stars above were sharp, indifferent. Jack lit a cigarette, a habit he'd kicked years ago but kept for nights like this. As the smoke curled into the humid air, something shifted inside him. The hurt hardened into resolve. Laura thought she'd outplayed him, but she didn't know about Blue Horizon. She didn't know about the $2,100,000 0-cents he'd quietly moved to a holding company over the past 9 years, all legal, all declared, but untouchable by her or her lawyer. She didn't know Jack Callahan was already 3 steps ahead. He crushed the cigarette under his boot and headed back inside. Tomorrow he'd run his shift like nothing had changed, but when he stepped off this rig, Laura and Cody would face a storm they hadn't seen coming. Jack wasn't just a rigger, he was a survivor. And survivors don't just take hits, they hit back. The Gulf of Mexico churned beneath the oil rig, its waves a restless mirror to Jack Callahan's mind. 3 days had passed since Laura's midnight text, the one that gutted their 19-year marriage and drained their savings. Jack, 53, stood on the rig's deck at dawn, the salty air sharp against his skin, his cigarette burned low against the rising sun. Laura thought she'd played him, thought her 26-year-old lover, Cody Vance, and their scheme to vanish with $237,000 0-cents was airtight. She didn't know about Blue Horizon. She didn't know Jack had been preparing for a storm like this for nearly a decade. Back in his quarters, Jack opened his laptop, the screen casting a pale light across the steel walls. He logged in to the encrypted account for Blue Horizon Holdings, a name inspired by his grandfather's fishing boat and the Texas coast he'd grown up on. The balance loaded, $2,100,000, 0 cents. For 9 years, Jack had diverted 65% of his rig income into this legal fortress. A holding company Ethan, his CPA cousin, had structured to shield it from marital claims. Every dollar was declared, every tax paid. But Laura had no clue it existed. To her, Jack was just a workhorse sending checks home. That was her first mistake. Ethan's latest email waited in the inbox, marked urgent. "Laura's deeper in than we thought," it read. "Cody's not just a grifter, he's a predator. Found 2 women in Nevada and 1 in Oregon, all 40 plus, all fleeced after he moved in. One filed a restraining order. He skipped town with her retirement fund. And those texts? Plan B isn't just talk. Cody's been Googling rig accidents, safety violations, even survival rates. They're not just after your money, Jack. Stay sharp." Jack's jaw tightened. The rig's hum vibrated through the floor, a reminder of the danger he faced daily. Gas leaks, blowouts, a slip that could send a man into the Gulf's jaws. Laura and Cody betting on an accident wasn't just cold. It was a death wish. He typed back to Ethan, "Get the lawyer ready. I want everything locked down before I'm stateside." 2 weeks remained on his rotation. 2 weeks to keep his head in the game while his life unraveled, 1,200 miles away. On the rig, Jack was a rock. He ran safety drills with precision, his voice steady as he barked orders to the crew. Tommy Ruiz, his second in command, kept eyeing him, sensing the shift but respecting the silence. At night, Jack pored over Ethan's updates. Laura had hired a shark of a lawyer, Preston Caldwell, known for bleeding high earners dry in Houston's divorce courts. She'd filed a domestic violence claim alleging Jack's emotional neglect and financial control, made her fear for her safety. It was a lie, but a clever one, designed to paint her as a victim and justify her theft. Ethan's next bombshell landed a week later. Laura had listed their Galveston beach house for sale, 25% below market value, with a forged signature on the listing agreement. She and Cody were already eyeing a condo in Santa Fe, their deposit paid with Jack's money. Worse, they'd been looting the house. Jack's grandfather's oak desk, his mother's silver candlesticks, even the custom bar he'd built for their 10th anniversary, loaded into a moving truck bound for an auction house. Jack's neighbor Ray, a retired shrimper with a nose for trouble, had sent photos of the truck and Cody lounging on Jack's patio, sipping Jack's bourbon like he owned the place. Jack closed the laptop, his hand steady but cold. Laura wasn't just leaving. She was erasing him, piece by piece, while planning a new life with a con man. But Blue Horizon wasn't her only blind spot. Jack had one more ace, a security system he'd installed at the house 3 years ago, wired to a cloud server only he could access. Laura had either forgotten or thought he couldn't check it from the rig. Her second mistake: he pulled up the live feed. There was Cody, sprawled on Jack's leather couch, scrolling on a phone. Laura paced nearby, her face tense, gesturing wildly as she talked. Jack couldn't hear the audio, but her body language screamed panic. Something wasn't going to plan. Good. He sent a screenshot to Ethan with a note. Time to tighten the noose. Ethan connected Jack with Marcus Tate, a Houston lawyer who'd made a name shredding gold diggers in court. Marcus was already building a case: fraud, forgery, criminal conspiracy, and a motion to freeze every account Laura had touched. The texts about Plan B were admissible, pulled from Jack's own cloud storage. Marcus's plan was surgical: hit Laura and Cody with an emergency restraining order, seize the stolen assets, and nullify the house sale before they could skip town. But Jack wanted more. He wanted to see Laura's face when her world collapsed. He wanted to be there, not hiding behind legal papers. "I'm coming home early," Jack told Marcus over a secure satellite call. "I want to watch them get served in person." Marcus hesitated. "Risky. She can't know you're back yet. Her lawyer's pushing for an emergency hearing in 5 days to lock you out of the house. We need you to look like you're still at sea." "I can play invisible," Jack said. "Set it up." The rig supervisor Vince approved Jack's early leave, sensing something big but asking no questions. Jack landed in Houston 48 hours later, met by Ethan at a quiet corner of the airport. Ethan handed him a burner phone and a folder thick with bank records, forged documents, and Cody's rap sheet. "She's been calling your regular phone non-stop," Ethan said as they drove to Marcus's office. "The bank flagged her transfers as suspicious. They're demanding you verify in person. She's freaking out." Jack smirked. "Let her sweat." At Marcus's office, the plan took shape. Ray, the neighbor, had sent new photos. Laura and Cody loading Jack's vintage Gibson guitar and a box of his father's Navy medals into Cody's Porsche. Marcus had the sheriff ready to serve papers at 8 a.m. in 2 days, time to catch them mid-packing. Jack would watch from Ray's house across the street, hidden but close enough to see Laura's reaction. The papers included a restraining order, an asset freeze, and a criminal complaint for the $50,000 0 cents forged loan. Marcus had also subpoenaed Laura's phone records, showing hours of calls to Cody while she told Jack she was at book club. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, sliding a tablet across the desk. "Ray caught this on his doorbell cam yesterday." The video showed a woman in a blazer snapping photos of Jack's house, a real estate sign already planted in the yard. "They're moving faster than we thought. If we don't act now, that house is gone." Jack's eyes narrowed. The house wasn't just brick and mortar, it was where he'd proposed to Laura, where he'd rebuilt the porch after Hurricane Ike, where he'd planned to retire. Losing it would be her final theft. "Serve them tomorrow," he said. "I want this over." That night, Jack stayed at Ethan's, sleeping on a pull-out couch. At 3 a.m., unable to rest, he checked the security feed again. Laura was alone in the kitchen, pouring wine, her face drawn. Cody was nowhere in sight. Jack zoomed in, catching a glimpse of a packed suitcase by the door. She was ready to run. His phone buzzed. A text from Laura to his regular number. "Jack, please call. It's urgent. The bank's made a mistake. I'm scared." The performance was Oscar-worthy, but Jack wasn't buying tickets. He drove to Galveston at dawn, pulling into Ray's driveway under cover of a foggy morning. Ray, a grizzled 70-year-old with a handshake like a vice, greeted him with coffee and a nod. "They're at it already," Ray said, pointing to the window. Across the street, Cody was tossing boxes into the Porsche, while Laura directed a moving crew. Jack's chest tightened as he saw his father's old toolbox, the one he'd used to teach Jack carpentry, loaded onto the truck. At 7:55 a.m., an unmarked sedan rolled up, followed by a sheriff's cruiser. 2 deputies and a court officer stepped out, their faces all business. Jack's pulse quickened, but he stayed by the window, hidden behind Ray's curtains. The deputies knocked. Laura answered, her smile fading as they identified themselves. Cody appeared behind her, his arm around her waist like a shield. The court officer handed over the papers, her voice cutting through the morning air. Emergency restraining order, asset freeze, and notice of criminal charges. Jack stepped onto Ray's porch, just close enough to be seen. Laura's eyes locked onto him, her face a kaleidoscope of shock, fear, and fury. "Jack?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're supposed to be on the rig." "Surprise," Jack said, his tone ice cold. He nodded to the deputies who continued reading the charges. Cody's bravado melted, his face paling as the words criminal conspiracy hit the air. Laura's tears started, but Jack knew her too well. They were crocodile tears, not regret. "You can't do this," Cody shouted, stepping forward. "She's terrified of you. We've got a domestic violence claim." "Dismissed an hour ago," Jack cut in. "Judge didn't buy it, especially not after your texts about Plan B and my life insurance." He held Cody's gaze, watching the younger man shrink. Laura's sob broke the silence, but Jack turned away. He'd seen enough. As the deputies supervised Laura and Cody removing only personal items, Jack walked back to Ray's, his boots heavy on the gravel. The trap had sprung, but this was just the start. In 3 weeks, they'd face a judge who'd see through Laura's lies. Cody would likely run, leaving Laura to face the fallout alone. And Jack? He'd be in Montana by then, on 50 acres of pine and silence, a cabin Laura never knew existed. Blue Horizon had saved him, but it was his own steel that would carry him forward. Back at Ray's, Jack poured another coffee, the Gulf's salt air drifting through the open window. His phone buzzed. Marcus, confirming the hearing date. Jack didn't reply. He was already planning his next move, a life built on his terms, far from the wreckage Laura thought she'd left behind. But one question lingered, a spark of curiosity that kept him sharp. What was Cody's next play? Because men like that didn't just disappear. They slithered to the next mark, and Jack would be watching. The Montana sky stretched endless above Jack Callahan's cabin, a canvas of stars, untouched by city lights. It was October, 6 months since the Galveston courtroom where Laura's carefully spun web of lies unraveled before Judge Hargrove. Jack, now 54, sat on the porch swing he'd carved from cedar, a glass of single malt scotch in hand. The air carried the crisp bite of autumn, and the pines whispered secrets only the mountains knew. This was his sanctuary, a 50-acre haven tucked into Blue Horizon Holdings, a secret Laura never uncovered. Here, Jack was free from the rig's grind, from a marriage built on sand, from the weight of a betrayal that nearly cost him everything. The courtroom had been a reckoning. Laura's domestic violence claim, a desperate ploy to paint herself as the victim, crumbled under the weight of Jack's airtight alibi. 7 weeks on a Gulf rig, 1,200 miles from her lies. Judge Hargrove, a no-nonsense Texan with a reputation for sniffing out fraud, had stared Laura down as she read the texts about Plan B. Cody's chilling suggestion that a rig accident could solve their money problems. "Mrs. Callahan," she'd said, her voice like gravel, "this isn't just greed, it's malice." The ruling was swift. Every dollar Laura had siphoned, $237.00, was returned to Jack. The Galveston beach house stayed his. Her spousal support demand was laughed out of court, and the forgery of the $50.00 home equity loan referred to the DA for criminal charges. Laura's tears hadn't moved Jack. He'd seen her crocodile tears before, during arguments over missed anniversaries, or when she'd forgotten to mention the Porsche in their driveway. Cody, true to form, vanished 2 days after the sheriff served them, taking Laura's remaining cash and her grandmother's diamond earrings. Ethan's research had predicted it. Cody Vance, 26, had a pattern: charm a woman, drain her, disappear. Now Laura was alone, living in a cramped apartment above her sister's garage in Oklahoma City, working shifts at a big-box store. A plea deal spared her jail time, but slapped her with 7 years probation and restitution payments she'd never afford. Jack didn't gloat. Some victories didn't need words. He took a sip of scotch, the warmth spreading through his chest. Blue Horizon Holdings had been his lifeline. For 9 years, he'd funneled $2,100,000 into it. A legal fortress Ethan had built to weather storms like Laura. It wasn't just money, it was foresight, born from watching buddies lose everything to divorces or bad deals. The cabin, bought 5 years ago as a retirement dream, was his reward. Laura never knew about Montana, never saw the meadow, where Jack now watched deer graze at dusk. That ignorance was her final defeat. Jack's phone buzzed on the swing, a soft intrusion. It was Ray, his old neighbor from Galveston, checking in. "Sold the house yet?" the text read. Jack had listed the beach house 3 months ago, too haunted by memories of Laura's betrayal to keep it. Ray had overseen the cleanup, shipping Jack's family heirlooms, the oak desk, the Navy medals, to Montana. The rest, including Laura's gaudy new furniture, went to charity. "Closing next week," Jack typed back. "Appreciate you, Ray." The sale would add another $400,000 to his savings, enough to live simply but well, bolstered by royalties from a small oil lease in Oklahoma. The peace wasn't just financial, it was the quiet of a life reclaimed. 28 years on rigs had taught Jack to face danger head-on. Blowouts, storms, men cracking under pressure. Laura's scheme was just another hazard, one he'd neutralized with the same calm he brought to a failing drill. But the cost lingered. He'd trusted her, built a life for them, only to find she'd been dismantling it for 14 months, smiling through every video call. The hurt had faded, replaced by a hard-won clarity. Trust was earned, not given. A new email pinged on his phone, this one from Marcus Tate, his lawyer. "DA's moving forward on the forgery case," it read. "Laura's fighting the restitution, but they've got her dead to rights. Also, Cody's been spotted in Vegas. Looks like he's working a new mark, a widowed casino owner." "Want me to tip off the locals?" Jack leaned back, considering. Cody was a snake, but Jack's fight was over. "Let him dig his own grave," he replied. Some men didn't need chasing. They'd trip on their own greed. The night deepened, the stars sharpening overhead. Jack set the glass down and walked to the edge of the porch, his boots crunching on the gravel path he'd laid last summer. The cabin wasn't just a hideout, it was a statement. He'd built it with his hands, from the stone fireplace to the bookshelves holding his father's old westerns. Every nail driven was a step away from Laura's lies. Every sunrise a reminder he'd survived. His mind drifted to the future. A consulting offer had come last week from a Canadian oil firm, 6 figures for part-time work, sharing the expertise he'd honed over decades. He hadn't accepted yet. The rig life was done, but the idea of mentoring younger crews, passing on what he'd learned, had appeal. Or maybe he'd start a small carpentry business, crafting furniture like his grandfather once did. The possibilities felt like the open sky, vast, unburdened. A faint rustle came from the woods, a coyote or maybe a fox. Jack smiled. Montana had its own rhythm, one he was learning to follow. His phone buzzed again, this time a photo from Ethan, a sunset over Austin's skyline with a caption, "You ever coming back to civilization?" Jack chuckled, typing, "Got my own civilization up here." He walked inside, the cabin's warmth enveloping him. On the mantel sat a framed photo of his parents, taken on their 40th anniversary. Their marriage had been the real deal, flawed but steady, built on loyalty. Jack hadn't found that with Laura, but he hadn't lost faith in it. Maybe one day with someone who valued the man behind the paycheck. For now, he was enough. As he locked the door, Jack caught his reflection in the window, gray at the temples, lines deeper than a year ago, but eyes clear, unbowed. Laura had tried to break him, to steal not just his money but his future. She'd failed because Jack had planned for the worst, not out of paranoia, but wisdom. Blue Horizon wasn't just a bank account, it was a lesson. Protect what matters, because no one else will. He turned off the porch light, the stars taking over. Tomorrow he'd hike the ridge behind the cabin, maybe sketch plans for a new workbench. The world could wait. For the first time in years, Jack Callahan was living for himself, on a horizon he'd built with his own hands. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, he knew Laura was staring at a ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. That was her burden now, not his.